There was once a man who, upon hearing just 4 short verses, attained enlightenment immediately. This man did not practice severe austerities for 6 years like the Buddha. He did not meditate for 49 days under the Bodhi tree. Just 4 verses, and this man became the Buddha's chief disciple in wisdom. His name was Sāriputta. Imagine standing on a crowded street in ancient India, searching for truth for 14 long years, following teacher after teacher, studying philosophy after philosophy, yet finding no answer that satisfies your deepest questions about life and death. Then one morning, you see a monk walking with such extraordinary calm and peace that it stops you in your tracks. You approach him hesitantly, ask him about his teaching, and he recites 4 simple lines. In that instant, everything becomes clear. The fog lifts. You see the path to liberation as clearly as you see the sun rising over the mountains. This is not a fairy tale. This is the true story of Sāriputta, the wisest disciple of the Buddha. Today we will discover how a brilliant young Brahmin became the greatest teacher after the Buddha himself, and what his life teaches us about wisdom, humility, and compassion. Our story begins in a small village called Nalaka, not far from the great city of Rajagaha, the capital of Magadha Kingdom. In this village lived a wealthy Brahmin named Vanganta, a respected scholar known throughout the region for his knowledge of the Vedas and his skill in philosophical debate. His wife, a gentle and intelligent woman named Sari, gave birth to a son, and they named him Upatiṣya. But as the boy grew, everyone began calling him Sāriputta, which means son of Sari. And this name would follow him throughout his life and into history. The family lived in comfort and abundance, with servants, gardens, and all the wealth that came with high caste and reputation. Young Upatiṣya grew up surrounded by learning, watching scholars come to his father's house to discuss the sacred texts, to argue about the nature of the soul, the meaning of sacrifice, and the path to union with Brahma. But even as a small child, Upatiṣya was different from other children. While other boys played games in the dusty streets chasing each other and laughing, Upatiṣya preferred to sit quietly in the corner of the hall, listening to the adults debate. His eyes would follow the speakers intently, his young mind absorbing their arguments, weighing their logic, finding the gaps in their reasoning. He asked questions that made the visiting scholars pause and look at each other in surprise. How could such a young child think so deeply about such profound matters? In the same village lived another boy named Kalita, son of another prominent Brahmin family. The 2 families had been friends for generations, and naturally, the 2 boys became inseparable companions. But this was no ordinary childhood friendship. While other children bonded over games and mischief, Upatiṣya and Kalita bonded over questions about existence. They would sit together under the shade of mango trees, talking not about toys or adventures, but about death, rebirth, suffering, and whether there was any escape from the endless cycle. People in the village would shake their heads and smile, saying these 2 boys were old souls, born with the weight of many lifetimes already on their young shoulders. As they grew into teenagers, their friendship deepened, but so did their restlessness. They studied everything their teachers could offer. They memorized the Vedas, mastered the rituals, learned the philosophical systems of their tradition. Yet something was missing. The answers they received felt incomplete, like trying to quench thirst with salt water. The more they learned, the more they realized how little they truly understood. And beneath all their study and debate lay one burning question that would not leave them alone. Is there a way to escape suffering? Is there a path beyond birth and death? This question would drive them on a journey that would change not only their lives, but the lives of countless beings for thousands of years to come. Story 1. The 8-year-old prodigy. When Upatiṣya was only 8 years old, a great event took place in the city of Rajagaha. Scholars and philosophers from all over the kingdom gathered for a grand debate, the kind of intellectual tournament that drew crowds like a festival. Brahmins came to display their knowledge, to challenge each other's interpretations of scripture, to prove the superiority of their philosophical positions. Upatiṣya's father was among the participants, and he brought his young son along, perhaps thinking the boy would benefit from watching the great minds at work. The hall was packed with people, the air thick with anticipation and the smell of incense. On the platform sat a renowned scholar, a man whose reputation for learning had spread far and wide. He was holding forth on the nature of the soul, speaking with great confidence about the eternal, unchanging Atman that transmigrates from life to life, never dying, never truly born, existing forever in its pure essence. The audience listened with rapt attention, nodding in agreement, murmuring their approval at his eloquent exposition. But in the back of the hall, a small boy sat with his brow furrowed, his young face troubled by what he was hearing. Suddenly, to everyone's astonishment, the child stood up. His small voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Venerable Sir, may I ask a question?" The hall fell silent. People turned to look at this audacious child who dared to interrupt a master scholar. The scholar, slightly amused and perhaps a bit annoyed, gestured for the boy to speak. Upatiṣya's voice was clear and respectful, but his question was sharp as a blade. "Sir, you say the soul is eternal and unchanging, but if the soul is truly eternal, why do we not remember our past lives? If we have lived countless times before, why must we learn everything anew in each life, as if we had never existed before?" The scholar opened his mouth to answer, then hesitated. The boy continued, his logic relentless despite his tender age. "And if the soul is truly unchanging, how can it experience suffering or happiness? That which does not change cannot be affected by anything. That which cannot be affected cannot feel. So how does your eternal, unchanging soul feel pain or pleasure? How does it experience anything at all?" The hall erupted in whispers. The great scholar stammered, tried to formulate a response, but found himself tangled in contradictions. He could not answer the 8-year-old boy. From that day forward, young Upatiṣya became famous throughout the region as a prodigy, a child of extraordinary intelligence. But the boy himself took no joy in his fame. He had proven he could ask difficult questions, but he still did not have the answers he sought. And this troubled him deeply. Story 2. The Sacred Vow with Moggallāna. 8 years passed, and both Upatiṣya and Kalita had grown into young men of 16. They had studied under the best teachers their families could find, had mastered the sacred texts, had become skilled in debate and philosophy. Yet the fundamental questions that had haunted them since childhood remained unanswered, and their hearts grew heavier with each passing year. One day, the two friends decided to attend a great festival being held on Mount Gijhakuta, the vulture peak near Rajagaha. Thousands of people had gathered there for the celebration, and the mountainside was alive with music, laughter, dancing, and feasting. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, vendors sold sweets and garlands, and everywhere people were caught up in the joy and excitement of the festival. But as Upatiṣya stood in the midst of this sea of happy, celebrating humanity, a profound sadness suddenly overwhelmed him. He turned to his friend Kalita, who was standing beside him, and spoke in a voice heavy with melancholy. "My friend, do you see all these people? Look at them laughing, eating, drinking, enjoying themselves, without a care in the world. But in 100 years, not a single person here will still be alive. Every one of them will be dead." Kalita nodded slowly, understanding immediately what his friend was feeling. Upatiṣya continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. "And after they die, they will be reborn somewhere else. Then they will die again, and be reborn again, and die again, over and over, endlessly, trapped in this cycle of birth and death, joy and suffering, meeting and separation. Is there no escape? Is this all there is?" The two young men stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of celebration swirling around them like a river around two stones. Then Upatiṣya turned to face his friend directly, and his voice became firm with determination. "Kolita, we must find the way out of this cycle. We must find the truth that leads to liberation from birth and death. And I propose this. Whichever one of us finds the truth first must tell the other immediately. We must not keep such knowledge to ourselves. Do you agree?" Kolita grasped his friend's hand firmly. "I agree completely. This is my vow to you, and I will keep it until death." They clasped hands there on the mountainside, while all around them people danced and sang, unaware that these two young men had just made a promise that would echo through the centuries. From that day forward, they left their comfortable homes and their wealthy families behind. They became wandering seekers, going from teacher to teacher, from philosophy to philosophy, searching desperately for someone who could show them the way to liberation. Eventually, they became students of a teacher named Sanjaya, who taught a form of skeptical philosophy that questioned everything but affirmed nothing. Under his guidance, both young men became excellent teachers themselves, and each gathered 125 disciples. But still, the answer they sought eluded them. Still, the deepest questions remained unanswered. 14 years passed in this way, and both men reached the age of 30, no longer young, feeling the weight of time pressing upon them, wondering if they would ever find what they were looking for. Story 3. Meeting Venerable Assaji. Then came the morning that would change everything. It was an ordinary day in Rajagaha, the kind of morning that seems like any other, with merchants opening their shops, housewives sweeping their doorsteps, and the smell of cooking fires drifting through the narrow streets. Upatiṣya was walking through the city, his mind heavy with the familiar burden of his unanswered questions. 14 years of searching, 14 years of studying with different teachers, mastering different philosophies, and still he felt no closer to the truth than when he had started. Perhaps, he thought with growing despair, there was no truth to be found. Perhaps human beings were simply meant to wander in darkness, born and dying without ever understanding why. Perhaps liberation was just a beautiful dream, a story people told themselves to make the suffering bearable. Lost in these dark thoughts, he almost didn't notice the monk walking toward him down the street. But something made him look up, and when he did, he stopped walking entirely, frozen in place by what he saw. The monk was not doing anything extraordinary. He was simply walking on his alms round, carrying his bowl, moving slowly and mindfully from house to house. But there was something about him that Upatiṣya had never seen in any human being before. The monk's steps were perfectly measured, unhurried, each foot placed with complete awareness. His eyes looked downward, not glancing left or right at the sights of the busy street, not seeking anything, not avoiding anything. His robes were arranged neatly, his bowl held at just the right height, neither too high nor too low. But it was not these external details that stopped Upatiṣya in his tracks. It was something else, something that radiated from the monk like light from a lamp, though it was not light exactly. It was a quality of deep, profound peace, a stillness that seemed to emanate from the very core of his being. This monk moved through the noisy, chaotic street like a swan gliding across a perfectly calm lake, untouched by the turbulence around him. Upatiṣya felt his heart begin to pound. In all his years of searching, meeting scholars and philosophers and holy men of every kind, he had never encountered anyone with this quality. He thought to himself with sudden, fierce hope, "This man has either attained the goal or is very close to it. He must be following a true teaching." His first impulse was to rush up to the monk immediately and ask him about his practice, his teacher, his path. But Upatiṣya restrained himself. The monk was on his alms round, engaged in the sacred practice of gathering his daily food. It would be disrespectful to interrupt him now, So Upatiṣya began to follow at a discreet distance, watching as the monk moved from house to house, accepting offerings with quiet gratitude, never speaking unless spoken to, maintaining that extraordinary quality of mindful presence with every step, every gesture. Finally, the monk finished his alms round and walked to a quiet spot under a tree. He sat down, arranged his robes, and began to eat his meal with the same careful attention he had brought to his walking. Upatiṣya waited, standing at a respectful distance, his mind racing with anticipation and hope. When the monk had finished eating, rinsed his bowl, and sat quietly for a few moments, Upatiṣya finally approached. He came forward with palms joined in respect, his head slightly bowed, and spoke with genuine humility. "Venerable Sir, your demeanor is so peaceful, so composed. May I ask who your teacher is? What teaching do you follow?" The monk looked up at him with kind eyes and answered simply, "I follow the Blessed One of the Sakyan clan, who left home, attained enlightenment, and now teaches the path to liberation. He is my teacher, and I practice according to his Dhamma." Upatiṣya felt a surge of excitement, but tried to keep his voice steady. "Please, Venerable Sir, would you teach me this Dhamma?" The monk smiled slightly and shook his head with humility. "I am newly ordained, friend. I have not been practicing long. I cannot give you an elaborate explanation of the teaching. I can only tell you briefly, in summary." But Upatiṣya's eyes were shining now with hope. "Please, Venerable Sir, tell me even just the summary. I will understand the detailed meaning myself." The monk, whose name was Assaji, looked at this earnest seeker before him and saw that he was ready, that his mind was prepared like well-tilled soil ready to receive the seed. So Assaji spoke, reciting the verses that had been passed down from the Buddha himself, speaking slowly and clearly so that each word could be heard and absorbed. "Ye Dhammā hetapabhava, tesam hetum tathagato aha, tesangyo nirodo, evavadi mahasamano." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. All phenomena arise from causes. The Tathagata has explained their causes and also their cessation. This is what the great ascetic teaches. For a moment, there was complete silence. Upatiṣya stood perfectly still, and tears began to stream down his face. In those 4 simple lines, the fog that had obscured his vision for 30 years suddenly lifted. He saw it all clearly now, as if a lamp had been lit in a dark room. Everything in this world, all the suffering, all the joy, all the confusion and pain, arises from causes. Nothing happens by chance. Nothing is given by the gods. Nothing is predetermined by fate. Everything arises dependent on conditions, and when those conditions cease, the effects cease as well. Suffering arises from causes, craving and ignorance and attachment, and therefore suffering can cease when those causes are removed. There is a way out. There is a path. It is not a mystery. It is not hidden. It is a matter of understanding causes and conditions, of removing the roots of suffering, of walking the path that leads to the cessation of all that binds us to the wheel of birth and death. In that moment, standing on a street in Rajagaha, listening to 4 verses from a humble monk, Upatiṣya attained the first stage of enlightenment, the stage called stream entry, where one sees the path clearly for the first time and knows with absolute certainty that one will reach the final goal. He had not yet completed the journey, but he could see the road ahead, and he knew beyond any doubt that it led to liberation. After 14 years of searching in darkness, he had finally found the light. When he could speak again, Upatiṣya asked with urgency, "Venerable Sir, where is the Blessed One now? I must go to him." Assaji replied, "He is staying at the bamboo grove at Kalandaka's park." Upatiṣya bowed deeply in gratitude, but before rushing off to find the Buddha, he remembered his vow. He had promised Kolita that whoever found the truth first would tell the other. And so, with his heart still soaring with joy and his mind illuminated by the Dhamma he had just heard, Upatiṣya turned and ran to find his dearest friend. Upatiṣya found Kalita at their dwelling place, and the moment Kalita saw his friend's face, he knew something extraordinary had happened. Upatiṣya's entire being seemed transformed, as if he were lit from within by some inner radiance. Before Kalita could even ask, Upatiṣya grasped his friend's hands and spoke with breathless excitement. "My friend, I have found it. I have found the path we have been seeking all these years. I met a monk this morning, a disciple of the Buddha Gautama, and he taught me the Dhamma. This is the truth we have been searching for." Without waiting for a response, Upatiṣya recited the same 4 verses that Assaji had spoken to him, explaining as best he could the profound insight they contained about the nature of causation, about how all suffering arises from conditions and can therefore cease when those conditions are removed. As Kalita listened, the same understanding arose in his mind, the same clarity, the same certainty. He too attained stream entry in that very moment, standing in their simple dwelling, hearing the Dhamma from his closest friend. When Upatiṣya finished speaking, Kalita simply said, "Let us go to the Buddha immediately." But then they both remembered their disciples, the 250 students who had gathered around them over the years, who looked to them for guidance and teaching. What should they do about them? They could not simply abandon these people who had placed their trust in them. Upatiṣya spoke thoughtfully. "We must tell them what we have found, and give them the choice. Those who wish to come with us may come. Those who wish to stay with our former teacher may stay. We will not compel anyone." So they gathered all their disciples and explained honestly what had happened, that they had found a teacher whose Dhamma surpassed anything they had learned before, and that they intended to go to this teacher and ordain under him. To their amazement, every single one of the 250 disciples said they would follow. If their teachers had found something so profound that it moved them to leave everything behind, then they too wanted to learn this teaching. And so a remarkable procession made its way to the bamboo grove. 252 seekers walking together toward the truth they had all been longing for. When the Buddha saw them approaching from a distance, he smiled and said to the monks around him, "Do you see those 2 leading the group? Those 2 will become my chief disciples, the foremost among all my followers." The Buddha received them all with great kindness and gave them ordination with the simple formula, "Come, monks, the Dhamma is well proclaimed. Live the holy life for the complete ending of suffering." In that moment, Upatiṣya received a new name, Sāriputta, and Kalita became known as Moggallāna. They had left behind their old lives, their old names, their wealth and status, and everything familiar. They had become homeless wanderers, monks with nothing but their robes and bowls, dedicated entirely to walking the path to liberation. The long search that had begun with 2 boys sitting under a mango tree wondering about life and death had finally led them to their true teacher and their true home. Story 4. The Sleepless Night. After his ordination, Sāriputta threw himself into the practice with tremendous energy and dedication. He had attained stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment, but he had not yet reached the final goal of arahantship, the complete liberation that the Buddha had achieved. He meditated intensely, studied the teachings carefully, observed every precept with meticulous attention, and pushed himself to practice with unwavering diligence. Days turned into weeks, and Sāriputta watched as other monks, some who had ordained even after him, began to announce that they had attained full enlightenment. He heard them speak of their liberation with joy and certainty, describing how all fetters had been broken, how all defilements had been destroyed, how they had done what needed to be done and would not be born again. Each time he heard such news, Sāriputta felt a growing unease in his heart. Why had he not yet attained the goal? He had been searching for truth since childhood, had studied with the best teachers, had developed his mind through years of philosophical training, and had practiced with complete sincerity since ordaining. Yet the final breakthrough eluded him, and as more time passed, a dark thought began to creep into his mind like a shadow. Perhaps he simply did not have the capacity for full enlightenment. Perhaps he had ordained too late in life, at 30 years old, when others had started much younger. Perhaps his past karma was too heavy, his defilements too deeply rooted, his wisdom insufficient despite all his learning. One night these thoughts became so overwhelming that Sāriputta could not sleep at all. He lay on his mat in the darkness, his mind churning with doubt and fear, feeling the weight of potential failure pressing down on him like a physical burden. Finally, unable to bear lying still any longer, he rose and went outside to practice walking meditation, pacing back and forth in the night air, trying to calm his agitated mind. But the doubts only grew stronger with each step, and he found himself walking faster and faster, as if he could somehow walk away from his own troubled thoughts. The Buddha, who possessed the divine eye and could perceive the mental states of his disciples, saw what was happening in Sāriputta's mind. He saw this brilliant, sincere monk being tormented by doubt, standing at a crucial crossroads where he might either break through to liberation or become paralyzed by his own uncertainty. So the Buddha rose from his dwelling and walked out into the night to find his disciple. When Sāriputta saw the Buddha approaching, he stopped his walking meditation immediately and bowed low with palms joined, embarrassed to be found in such a state of agitation. The Buddha's voice was gentle as he asked, "Sāriputta, why are you not sleeping? Why are you walking meditation at this hour?" Sāriputta hesitated, not wanting to admit his weakness, but he could not lie to his teacher. "Lord, I cannot sleep," he said quietly. The Buddha asked simply, "Why not?" And then, like a dam breaking, the words poured out of Sāriputta. "Lord, I am afraid. I am afraid that I will not be able to attain the goal. So many others have already reached arahantship, but I have not. I ordained at 30 years old, perhaps too late. Perhaps my faculties are not sharp enough. Perhaps I do not have the capacity for full enlightenment." His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, revealing the depth of his distress. The Buddha looked at him with infinite compassion and then asked a question that seemed to come from nowhere. "Sāriputta, in all your studies of the past, in all the countless eons you have examined, have you ever seen any phenomenon that arose without causes and conditions?" Sāriputta thought for a moment and answered, "No, Lord, I have not." The Buddha continued, "And have you ever seen any phenomenon that arose from causes and conditions, but did not cease when those causes and conditions ceased?" Again, Sāriputta answered, "No, Lord, I have not." The Buddha's voice became even more gentle, almost playful. "Then why are you worried? Enlightenment is also a phenomenon that arises from causes and conditions. You have the causes, wisdom, effort, virtue, concentration. You are providing the conditions through your practice. When all the necessary factors come together, the result will arise naturally. Just as a seed planted in good soil will sprout when the conditions of water and sunlight are provided. You do not need to worry about whether you have the capacity. You do not need to compare yourself to others. You simply need to continue practicing correctly, with patience and without anxiety. The fruit will come in its own time." These words struck Sāriputta like a cool breeze on a hot day, dispersing the clouds of doubt that had been gathering in his mind. Of course, he thought, how could he have forgotten this fundamental principle? Everything arises from causes and conditions, including enlightenment itself. There was no need for worry, no need for comparison, no need for this painful self-doubt. He simply needed to continue walking the path with steady effort and trust in the process. That night, for the first time in many nights, Sāriputta slept peacefully and deeply. When he woke the next morning, his mind was clear and refreshed. He sat down to meditate, contemplating the teaching on dependent origination that the Buddha had reminded him of. seeing with ever greater clarity how all phenomena arise and cease according to conditions, how suffering arises from ignorance and craving, and how it ceases when those roots are cut. And in that meditation session, just 15 days after his ordination, Sāriputta attained full arahantship, complete liberation from all fetters, the end of all becoming, the final goal he had been seeking since he was a child, asking questions under the mango tree. The long journey was complete. After attaining arahantship, Sāriputta quickly distinguished himself as the most brilliant teacher among all the Buddha's disciples. His ability to analyze the Dhamma, to explain complex teachings in clear and accessible ways, and to guide students according to their individual temperaments, became legendary throughout the Sangha. The Buddha formally appointed him as the first chief disciple, the position of highest honor, seated at the Buddha's right hand, while Moggallāna, who excelled in psychic powers, sat at his left.
His wisdom
From that
is a
day
vast
forward,
ocean.
Sāriputta became known as the general of the Dhamma, the one who turned the wheel of teaching after the Buddha himself, helping to guide and train thousands of monks and nuns on the path to liberation. Story 5. The Lesson from the 7-Year-Old Boy. One afternoon, Sāriputta returned late from his alms round in the city. He had been teaching a group of lay followers, answering their questions about the Dhamma, and the discussion had gone longer than usual. By the time he walked back to the monastery, the sun was already low in the sky, and he felt the weariness in his bones. He was, after all, no longer a young man, and the day had been long and hot. Seeing a large tree with inviting shade, Sāriputta decided to rest for a moment before continuing to his dwelling. He took out his sitting cloth, the small mat that monks used to sit on, and without thinking much about it, simply spread it on the ground beneath the tree and sat down with a sigh of relief. The cool shade felt wonderful after the heat of the day, and he closed his eyes for a moment, allowing his tired body to relax. At that moment, a young novice monk named Mahākala happened to be walking past. He was only 7 years old, a child really, recently ordained and still learning the most basic rules of monastic conduct. When he saw the great elder Sāriputta, the chief disciple himself, sitting under the tree, he stopped and looked more carefully. Then, with the innocent directness of a child who has been taught something and believes it should be followed, he approached the elder and spoke. "Venerable Sir," the little boy said, his voice high and clear, "you have not spread your sitting cloth properly." Sāriputta opened his eyes in surprise and looked at the child standing before him. "What do you mean, young one? How have I not done it properly?" The 7-year-old explained earnestly, as if reciting a lesson he had learned. "Venerable Sir, before spreading the sitting cloth, one must first examine the ground carefully to make sure there are no insects or small creatures there. Otherwise, we might harm them when we sit down, and that would be breaking the precept against killing. You did not check the ground first." For a moment, there was silence. Any other senior monk, any other person of high status and reputation, might have felt embarrassed or defensive at being corrected by a child. They might have dismissed the boy's words, or explained that they had been too tired to notice, or pointed out that a 7-year-old should not presume to instruct an elder. But Sāriputta did none of these things. Instead, he immediately stood up, folded his sitting cloth carefully, and then turned to the young novice and joined his palms together in a gesture of deep respect, bowing to the child as if the boy were his own teacher. "Thank you, young friend, for reminding me," Sāriputta said with complete sincerity. "You are absolutely right. I was careless and heedless. I allowed my tiredness to make me forget the proper procedure. You have been a good spiritual friend to me today." The little boy, not quite understanding why this great elder was bowing to him, simply nodded and continued on his way, while Sāriputta carefully examined the ground, found a spot free of insects, and only then spread his cloth and sat down again. Several other monks had witnessed this exchange, and they were astonished. They gathered together afterward, whispering among themselves, "Did you see that?" The chief disciple, the elder Sāriputta, the wisest monk in the entire Sangha, bowed to a 7-year-old child and thanked him for a correction. How is this possible? Should not the child be the one showing respect to the elder? When Sāriputta heard about their confusion, he gathered them together and explained with a gentle smile. Brothers, the Dhamma does not belong to any particular age or status. Truth is truth, whether it comes from the mouth of an elder or a child. That young novice spoke correctly about the precepts, and when someone speaks correctly, we should listen with gratitude, regardless of who they are. If I had let my pride prevent me from accepting his correction, if I had thought myself too important or too knowledgeable to learn from a child, then I would have been the fool, not him. Pride is the enemy of wisdom. The moment we think we are too wise to learn, too senior to be corrected, too important to admit a mistake, that is the moment our wisdom begins to die. Humility is not weakness. Humility is the soil in which true wisdom grows. When the Buddha heard about this incident, he praised Sāriputta highly, saying to the assembled monks, "This is what true wisdom looks like." A truly wise person does not cling to status or reputation. They care only about what is true and what is right. Learn from Sāriputta's example. This is the mind of one who has truly understood the Dhamma. Story 6. Venerable Sariputta teaching Rāhula. After the Buddha gave Rāhula that powerful lesson with the water bowl about the importance of truthfulness, he entrusted much of his son's daily training to Sāriputta. The chief disciple became like a second father to the young novice, guiding him with patience, wisdom, and deep compassion through the challenges of monastic life. Sāriputta understood that Rāhula faced unique pressures as the Buddha's son, everyone watching him, everyone expecting perfection. And he made it his mission to help the boy develop not just knowledge, but genuine wisdom and inner strength. One day, when Rāhula was still quite young, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, he came to Sāriputta with a question that had been troubling him. "Venerable Sir," the boy asked, "how should I practice meditation? Everyone tells me different things. Some say I should focus on my breath, others say I should contemplate the body, others say I should develop loving kindness. I am confused and don't know where to start." Sāriputta looked at the earnest young face before him and smiled gently. He could see that Rāhula was genuinely seeking guidance, not just asking out of idle curiosity. So he sat down with the boy and began to teach him systematically, the way only Sāriputta could teach, breaking down complex practices into clear, manageable steps. "Rāhula," Sāriputta began, "meditation is like building a house. You cannot start with the roof. You must begin with the foundation. So let me teach you the foundations of meditation practice, and then you can build upon them as you grow." He then guided Rāhula through a comprehensive meditation instruction that would become famous in the Buddhist tradition. First, develop loving kindness. Sit quietly and cultivate thoughts of goodwill toward all beings, wishing them happiness and freedom from suffering. When you practice loving kindness, you reduce ill will and anger in your mind. Then develop compassion, feeling sympathy for those who suffer. This reduces cruelty. Then develop appreciative joy, rejoicing in the happiness and success of others. This reduces jealousy and envy. And finally, develop equanimity, the ability to remain balanced and peaceful regardless of whether things go your way or not. This reduces attachment and aversion. Rāhula listened carefully, his young mind absorbing every word. Sāriputta continued. Next, contemplate the impurity of the body. This does not mean hating the body or thinking it is evil. It means seeing it clearly without the delusion that makes us think it is more beautiful or permanent than it really is. The body is made of flesh, blood, bones, organs. all constantly changing, all subject to decay. When you see this clearly, you reduce sensual desire and vanity." The boy nodded, beginning to understand. Sāriputta went on, "Then practice mindfulness of breathing. This is one of the most important practices. Sit comfortably, keep your back straight, and simply observe your breath as it flows in and out. Don't try to control it, just watch it. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the breath. This practice develops concentration, calms the mind, and prepares you for deeper insights." But Sāriputta did not stop there. He taught Rāhula to contemplate the elements, seeing how the body is made up of earth, water, fire, and air, how these elements are not truly mine, but are simply borrowed from nature and will return to nature when the body dies. He taught him to contemplate death, not morbidly, but as a way of understanding impermanence and the urgency of practice. He taught him to observe feelings as they arise and pass away, to watch thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky, to see how nothing in experience is permanent or truly satisfying or constitutes a solid self. Week after week, month after month, Sāriputta patiently guided Rāhula through these practices, checking on his progress, correcting his mistakes, encouraging him when he felt discouraged, celebrating his breakthroughs. He treated the Buddha's son not as a special case requiring either harsh discipline or special privileges, but simply as a sincere student deserving of the best teaching he could offer. One day, after Rāhula had been practicing diligently for some time, Sāriputta took him to see the Buddha. "Lord," Sāriputta said with evident pride, "your son has been practicing well. He has developed concentration, mindfulness, and insight. I believe he is ready for deeper instruction." The Buddha looked at Rāhula with great warmth and then gave him a teaching on the contemplation of the five aggregates, showing him how to see that form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are all impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. Following this teaching and continuing his practice under Sāriputta's guidance, Rāhula eventually attained full arahantship while still a young man, becoming one of the youngest fully enlightened monks in the Sangha. Years later, when other monks asked Rāhula about his training, he would always speak with deep gratitude about Sāriputta. "The Buddha gave birth to my body," Rāhula would say, "but Venerable Sariputta gave birth to my wisdom. He was patient when I was foolish, encouraging when I was discouraged, and skillful in knowing exactly what teaching I needed at each stage of my development. Without him, I would not have reached liberation." And Sāriputta, hearing these words, would simply smile and say, "I only did what any teacher should do, see the potential in a student and help them realize it." The credit belongs to Rāhula himself, who practiced sincerely and never gave up. Story 7. You are the general of the Dhamma. One day, a group of monks came to the Buddha with a question that had been troubling them. They had been observing Sāriputta teaching, watching how he guided students with such skill and precision, how he could explain the most complex aspects of the Dhamma in ways that anyone could understand, and how under his guidance, many monks had attained enlightenment. The monks asked respectfully, "Lord, we see that the elder Sāriputta is an extraordinary teacher, but we wonder, is his understanding of the Dhamma equal to yours? Does he see what you see?" The Buddha smiled at this question, understanding the confusion behind it. "No," he said simply, "Sāriputta's understanding is not equal to mine." The monks nodded, feeling their assumption confirmed. Of course, no one could equal the Buddha's wisdom. But then the Buddha continued, and his next words surprised them. "However, in the ability to analyze the Dhamma, to categorize it, to teach it systematically, and to guide students according to their individual needs and capacities, Sāriputta excels in a way that is unique among all my disciples." The Buddha went on to explain, using a metaphor that would become famous throughout the Sangha. Imagine a great king who wishes to conquer new territory and establish his rule over distant lands. The king himself may have the vision, the authority, and the ultimate power, but he does not go to the battlefield alone. He sends his most trusted general, a brilliant military strategist who knows how to organize the troops, how to plan the campaigns, how to adapt tactics to different situations, and how to train new soldiers to carry on the fight. That general does not have the same authority as the king, but in the practical work of establishing the king's rule, the general is indispensable. The Buddha looked at his assembled disciples with great warmth. I am like that king, and Sāriputta is my general. I have discovered the Dhamma. I have opened the path. I have shown the way to liberation. But it is Sāriputta who organizes this teaching, who trains the monks, who guides them step by step along the path, who turns the wheel of Dhamma after I have set it in motion. He is the general of the Dhamma, and without him, many who have reached liberation would still be wandering in confusion. From that day forward, Sāriputta became known by this title, Dhammasenāpati, the general of the Dhamma, the one who commanded the forces of wisdom in the Buddha's army of liberation. Yet despite this great honor, Sāriputta himself remained humble, always seeing himself simply as a servant of the teaching, a finger pointing at the moon, never the moon itself. Story 8. Asking the Buddha's permission before passing away. Sāriputta was now an old man, in his 80s, and he had been the Buddha's chief disciple for over 40 years. He had taught thousands of monks, had traveled throughout India spreading the Dhamma, had debated with philosophers and converted skeptics, had lived a life of complete dedication to the path of liberation. But now he felt in his body the unmistakable signs that his time was coming to an end. His energy was fading, his strength diminishing, and with the clear insight of an arahant, he knew that he would soon pass away. When this realization came to him, his first thought was of his teacher, and his heart was filled with a deep wish. He wanted to see the Buddha one more time before he died, to pay his final respects, to express his gratitude for the teaching that had transformed his life, and to ask permission to take his leave. So Sāriputta, accompanied by his attendant monk and his young student Kunda, made the journey to where the Buddha was staying. When he arrived, despite his physical weakness, he performed a full prostration before his teacher, touching his forehead to the Buddha's feet in the traditional gesture of ultimate respect. Then he sat before the Buddha and spoke with great emotion, his voice trembling slightly. Lord, I have come to ask your permission. My time in this life is ending. Soon I will pass into final nibbana, and I wish to see you once more before that moment comes. The Buddha looked at his oldest and most faithful disciple with deep affection. Sāriputta, where do you wish to go? Sāriputta replied, Lord, I wish to return to my birthplace, to the village of Nālaka where I was born. My mother still lives there, and she has never accepted the Dhamma. She still follows the old Brahmin traditions, still performs the fire sacrifices, still believes in the eternal soul. Before I die, I wish to teach her, to give her the chance to understand the truth. This is my final duty. The Buddha was silent for a moment, and those watching could see the play of emotions across his face: sadness at losing his chief disciple, joy at Sāriputta's compassion for his mother, and deep appreciation for this monk who, even at the moment of death, thought only of helping others find liberation. Finally, the Buddha spoke softly, Then go, Sāriputta. Do what you feel is right. You have my blessing. Sāriputta bowed deeply one last time, and as he prepared to leave, he spoke words that would be remembered forever. Lord, throughout all my years as your disciple, I have never knowingly transgressed even the smallest precept. If I have ever failed you in any way, please forgive me. The Buddha's eyes glistened with tears, a rare sight, and he replied, Sāriputta, you have been faultless. You have been my true son in the Dhamma. Go in peace. And so Sāriputta departed, beginning his final journey home. Story 9. converting his mother before passing away. The journey back to Nālaka was long and difficult for Sāriputta's weakening body, but he was sustained by his determination to see his mother one more time. When he finally arrived at his childhood home, the house where he had grown up, where he had sat under the mango tree asking questions about life and death, he was so weak that he had to be helped inside. His mother, Sari, now an elderly woman herself, was shocked to see her son in such a condition. She had not seen him in many years, and though she had heard of his fame as the Buddha's chief disciple, she had never approved of his choice to leave home and become a wandering monk. In her heart, she still followed the Brahmin religion of her ancestors, still believed that her son had wasted his life following a false teacher. But seeing him now, so frail and clearly dying, all her old grievances melted away, and only a mother's love remained. She prepared a room for him, the very room where he had slept as a child, and she tended to him with tears streaming down her face. Sāriputta lay on his mat, his body burning with fever, his breath coming with difficulty, but his mind remained perfectly clear and luminous, untouched by the body's suffering. He knew he had very little time left, perhaps only hours, and he had to find a way to reach his mother's heart, to break through the barriers of her lifelong beliefs and show her the truth before it was too late. That night, as Sari sat beside him, wiping his forehead with a cool cloth, Sāriputta began to speak. His voice was weak, but his words were clear and filled with gentle authority. "Mother, do you remember when I was a child, how I used to ask you questions about everything? Do you remember how I wanted to understand the meaning of life and death?" Sari nodded, fresh tears falling. "Yes, my son, I remember. You were always so curious, so intelligent. Even as a small boy, you asked questions that the adults could not answer." Sāriputta smiled faintly. "Mother, I have found the answers to those questions. I have found the truth I was seeking, and now, before I leave this world, I want to share it with you. Will you listen?" His mother clutched his hand. "I will listen, my son. Tell me anything you wish." And so, there in that small room, in the house where he had been born 80 years before, Sāriputta began to teach his mother the Dhamma. He spoke about suffering, how all beings experience pain and dissatisfaction, how even moments of happiness are tinged with the knowledge that they will not last. He spoke about the cause of suffering, how it arises from craving, from our desperate clinging to things that are by nature impermanent, from our refusal to accept the truth of constant change. He spoke about the cessation of suffering, how it is possible to find a peace that does not depend on external conditions, a liberation that comes from letting go of all grasping and delusion. And he spoke about the path, the practical steps of virtue, meditation, and wisdom that lead to this liberation. As he spoke, Sari listened with her whole being, and something began to shift in her heart. She had spent her entire life performing rituals, making offerings to the gods, seeking blessings and protection through prayers and sacrifices. But she had never found the peace she was seeking. She had always felt a subtle anxiety, a fear of death, a sense that something essential was missing. Now, listening to her dying son explain the Dhamma with such clarity and conviction, she began to see what she had been missing all along. Sāriputta continued, his voice growing even weaker, but his determination unwavering. "Mother, look at this body of mine. Look at how it is breaking down, how it is failing, how it is subject to sickness and death. This is the nature of all conditioned things. They arise, they exist for a time, and they pass away. There is nothing in this world that is permanent, nothing that we can hold on to forever. The soul that the Brahmins speak of, the eternal, unchanging Atman, does not exist. What we call self is just a temporary collection of physical and mental processes, constantly changing, constantly flowing, like a river that appears to be the same but is actually made of different water every moment." Sari felt something crack open inside her, like a shell that had been encasing her heart for decades. "But my son," she whispered, If there is no eternal soul, then what happens when we die? Where do we go? Sāriputta's eyes were filled with infinite compassion as he looked at his mother. Mother, the question itself is based on a misunderstanding. There is no we that goes anywhere. When the conditions that support this body and mind cease, the body and mind cease. That is all. But if the mind at the moment of death is filled with craving and ignorance, then new conditions arise, and a new body and mind come into being, continuing the cycle of birth and death. This is what we call rebirth. But if the mind is completely free from craving and ignorance, if it has realized the truth fully, then when this body dies, there's no more rebirth. The cycle ends. This is Nibbana, the complete liberation, the end of all suffering. As Sāriputta spoke these words, something extraordinary happened. Sari, who had never meditated in her life, who had never studied the Dhamma, who had resisted the Buddha's teaching for decades, suddenly saw the truth of what her son was saying. She saw the impermanence of all things, saw how her clinging and craving had caused her suffering, saw the possibility of letting go. In that moment, sitting beside her dying son, she attained stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment, the irreversible entry onto the path to liberation. Her face transformed, the lines of worry and fear smoothing out, replaced by a radiant peace. She looked at her son with wonder and gratitude. My son, I understand now. I see it. Thank you for this gift, the greatest gift you could have given me. Sāriputta smiled, and in that smile was all the love and joy of a son who has fulfilled his final duty to his mother. Mother, you have entered the stream that flows to Nibbana. You will not be reborn in any lower realm. Within 7 lifetimes at most, you will reach complete liberation. This makes me happier than anything else in my entire life. That night, surrounded by his family and his fellow monks, with his mother sitting peacefully beside him, her hand in his, Sāriputta passed away. He entered into the final Nibbana, the complete cessation of all conditioned existence, the end of birth and death, the ultimate peace that he had been seeking since he was a child, asking questions under the mango tree. His last thoughts were of gratitude to the Buddha, of love for all beings, and of the joy that comes from a life fully lived in accordance with the Dhamma. The room was filled with a profound stillness, and those present said later that they felt not sadness, but a sense of completion, as if they had witnessed something sacred and beautiful, the perfect ending to a perfect life. After Sāriputta's cremation, his relics were collected with great reverence. His attendant monk Kunda, along with several other disciples, brought them back to the Buddha at Jetavana Monastery. Kunda approached with tears streaming down his face, carrying the relics carefully in his hands. He bowed low and placed them before the Buddha, then spoke in a voice choked with emotion. Lord, these are the relics of the elder Sāriputta. He has passed into final Nibbana. I feel as if the whole world has become dark. How can we continue without him? The Buddha looked at the relics of his chief disciple, and those watching saw deep sadness pass across his face. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and filled with wisdom. Kunda, do you think that Sāriputta took away the Dhamma when he died? Do you think he took away the path to liberation? Kunda shook his head. No, Lord, of course not. The Buddha continued gently. Then what have we lost? Sāriputta's body has dissolved, as all bodies must. But the Dhamma he taught remains. The example he set remains. If you practice as he taught, then Sāriputta is not gone. He lives on in every monk who practices virtue, in every student who develops wisdom. The Buddha then spoke to all the assembled monks. Do not grieve excessively. All conditioned things are impermanent. Everything born must die. Instead of clinging to what cannot be held, practice the Dhamma that leads to the end of all birth and death. This is how you honor Sāriputta's memory. And so the monks dried their tears and returned to their practice, carrying Sāriputta's example in their hearts. knowing that though his physical form was gone, his wisdom would continue to guide seekers for as long as the Dhamma remained in the world.